Hello and welcome to another episode of the College to Canton podcast, the perfect show for any and every college football and NFL fan. I'm your host, Stefan Lako. You can find me on Twitter at Stefan Lako. And today I am joined by Kevin Coleman. You can find him on Twitter at DeBoys_22 from the Devy Royale. Kevin, how the hell are you today, man?
Hey, I'm doing good, man. I'm excited. It's July. We're getting close to college football season, so that's the fun part. We're starting to get into like the dog days, but it's there. We had a little good 4th of July, and now we're diving into it.
You know, and it gets pretty tough out here for us diehard football fans, but there's a lot of soccer going on right now, like the Gold Cup, and we've got the Women's World Cup. So we've got a few things, and you know, I living in Colorado, I can bet on stuff, so that makes every sport just a little bit more interesting. So yeah, but I'm excited. How many of your, I don't know how many leagues you're in, but how many of your leagues are you guys already like starting some of your rookie drafts or your Devy drafts? How are you kind of already into the thick of it? Beginning of July, and we're already drafting?
Yeah, my dynasty leagues, they're pretty much almost done. Like we kind of hit those. Devy and like the CTC leagues I'm in and some of the CFF leagues I'm in, we do it like July now. So I think part of it is to kind of get that, we're bored. Like we were, all right, let's do some drafting and kind of get some names out there from the spring. So I still have like, I'm starting up like I'm in a CFF Dynasty League that I joined last year. We started up this weekend, and then we got a few more that supplementals that are going. So like July is like the perfect time for it because everybody's not that busy. We're still able to kind of do it, and we get to kind of push out for us non-soccer fans out there. We get to have something to look forward to in July.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm actually on the clock in a C2C league right now. I ended up getting Justice Haynes with like pick 10 in the first round, so I was pretty happy about that. So we'll see how things go. Yeah, I'm already drafting in a bunch of leagues, but we're just crazy people drafting in July. But let's I just want to kind of talk about kind of some of the stuff you guys do over at Devy Royale. Tell everyone a little bit about it. I know people can subscribe to your Patreon for super cheap, like $3 a month. Tell us what they can get if they subscribe and check out your YouTube channel and stuff.
Yeah, it's, the Devy Royale has always started as like a passion project. And, for us, that's really what it is. So that's why we keep it cheap for everybody out there. And, with your subscription, for $3, you get the Discord that we have. That's pretty active. We got some crazy degenerates in there. And we have, so the big two things is we do something called the College Football Manifesto. And we're doing this giant update right now on it. But essentially, it's a 400-page document. We go through every Power 5 depth chart. We space it out, what you're looking at there, fantasy points per game. We talk about, player spotlights. So we actually have over 120 player spotlights in the new update coming out that we write ourselves. We do like position battles in February, and we update those. And then we do best bets. So for our bettors out there, as the season comes closer, we add a betting section, and you get that every update for just $3 one time. So in terms of like the Patreon. And then we also have something we created this year called the Devy Dynasty Rankings. And so this is where we ranked over, 150 quarterbacks, 200 running backs, wide receivers, and then tight ends, but with dynasty players within Devy. So what these guys are valued at. So you want to know where Marvin Harrison Jr. is at compared to Jalen Waddle? It's in there. But if you just want Devy rankings, we actually have a sheet that I am way too dumb to create. So this is all Christian Williams who does all this stuff. We actually rank everything combined, and it spits out our individual rankings for everything. So Devy, Dynasty. So if you don't even play Devy, but you like Dynasty, we have our rankings there. And then we just uploaded a Substack. So we're going to do some writings for everybody. So if you join the Patreon, you get a free subscription for life until you leave it for anything that we write. And I just dropped the riskiest Devy quarterbacks to roster, and I kind of did a breakdown of 9 guys, and I compared what you could trade for them if you're going to hold them, sell them, or buy them right now. And so you get all of that plus little things that we do. We do a weekly podcast. Christian drops his projections in there. Jay has his analytical profile. So all that for $3 a month. That's it.
That's awesome. I love it. That is a lot of work right there. And you know what? I love talking to fellow nerds. I'm just going to say it. Yes. It's always good. Like when you hear people talk about some of the stuff they get into, I'm like, oh, I love it. It's fun, especially when we have so much in common. Quick question though, regarding your quarterback article that just dropped. Give me just maybe a name that would surprise people on that list that maybe is a little riskier than people think. And then we'll jump into kind of your approach or our approach to Devy, and then we're going to get into some wide receiver specific discussion. But before all that, a quarterback that maybe surprised us a little bit.
I put K Klubnik on there, so I mean that might surprise. I mean, so I like K.
I have so much Cade Klubnik.
I said he's a hold for me, when I was looking at just in general. But I think the reality is, like, for Cade, he's got to really improve that decision making and pocket awareness. Like, you saw the 2 interceptions in the spring, you saw some of that happen last year, and he's a smaller guy, like 195. They said he put some time in the weight room. Now, I expect big things with him in Riley's offense, so I do think he can definitely be on there. But I don't think like he's a for sure gone like in that 25 class, which has a ton of question marks at the quarterback position. Like, he's got to take that next step. Like, he's not just a full blown, hey, 5-star kid's going to step in and he can be the number one guy. He's got some stuff to improve, but luckily for everybody out there, Dabo finally listened and got himself an offensive coordinator that can develop some offense out there. So he'd be much more riskier, I think, without Riley being there. Now that Riley's there, I think it limits the risk a little bit, but that's one of the names on the sheet that I put down.
Yeah, Garrett Riley does change a lot for me because I'm curious what would have happened if DJU got to play with Garrett Riley.
Mm-hmm.
That would have been fun to see. It would have been a little bit more fair to see. Of course, now I'm hearing that DJU is maybe not even going to be starting at Oregon State. So light all those Devy shares on fire, I suppose. There's not a whole lot of value there. Let's get into just talking about Devy in general. By now, people listening to the show have a pretty good understanding what that is. We get to roster developmental players, college players who then join our NFL teams once they are drafted, or in the case of yours truly, many of mine are undrafted free agents that find teams because sometimes I make bad calls. But what's your overall approach to Devy leagues? And maybe even before that, why do you enjoy Devy leagues? What about it kind of interests you, and why is this something that you like to add when Dynasty's already so deep?
I think for me, I just love college football, and so this was added. Like, I get to use my college football, knowledge a little bit and into my dynasty leagues, and plus we're degenerates. Like, I love this stuff enough to where, and I also, like, with my league mates, I want to be smarter than them. Like, I want to be like, hey, I hit this dude in the 3rd round, you suck. Like, that's part of fantasy. Like,
yeah.
that crap talking and that stuff. So, really what it came into, though, like anything, when I first got into this, my buddy who I went to college with, he was in with Devy League, and I'd never known what it was. And he messaged me. He's like, hey, we have an orphan in our league. Would you like to do it? And I was like, what the hell is Devy? And I had no idea what it was. Like, and he told me, he's like, oh, it's college, blah, blah, blah. So really, I got into it because of friendship. Like, I got into it because, keeping me and my friends together, like fantasy kind of does. It keeps that kind of camaraderie with guys all over the country and stuff like that. So that's really why I got into it. Then I just got hooked because I think for me personally, like, I college football is my first love. Like, I love college football. I love fantasy in the NFL side, but I just love, like, the pageantry. Like, I'll never forget where I was watching the Rose Bowl in Texas USC. Like, that was my favorite game I've ever watched. I was in high school.
That was madness.
Yeah, and that whole year, like, I'm a Michigan fan, but, like, for me, I was a huge Vince Young fan. I loved Vince Young. I loved everything about him, and for him to kind of take down USC, and people don't understand, USC was a juggernaut. Like, there was no way they should have lost that game, but Vince Young single-handedly took that game and just kind of won it. For me, that solidified my college football fandom, and then this has turned into, like, oh, I can do this and kind of and understand that players, and I love scouting and doing all that stuff. So, like, really, it was just a combination of everything that I loved into a format that I really like. And plus, I think it's less invasive too, in terms of, like, you don't really have to do college fantasy, because that could be a whole nother, like, I don't even know.
It's a whole nother beast.
Those dudes that do, like, the CFF stuff are crazy, because, like, to me, I'm like, man, I'm way overwhelmed, and I love college football. Those guys are a different level, and this just adds that little bit of extra, like, you can still have some fun in college football, do that stuff, and a little bit of value, and a little bit of it's a little harder, but it's not crazy to where you have to worry about, like, Akron's running back room. Like, I don't need to worry about that. I can focus on Alabama's running back room, and that's really where it came from. Just falling in love for college football.
Yeah, no, I love it. I'm kind of the same way. I enjoy the additional strategy that comes with it too. One of the things that you do on your YouTube channel that I really appreciate is try to give the listener or the watcher some information on, like, how can you compare a Devy asset to an NFL player, and stuff like that. I think is really fun because it adds a level of gamesmanship. It adds, like, more trading, essentially, hopefully, and even another draft. So it's just more of all the things that we love. And so to me, it's a good thing. What's your overall approach to Devy leagues? How do you view your Devy roster? Is it league specific? Are you always entering kind of with the same strategy? I'd love to kind of hear your perspective on it, because we all approach it a little bit differently.
My approaches have really shifted. So I like this question, because when I first started, I tried to do it like a true minor league team. Like, all right, these guys are coming up on my NFL roster. I can't wait for Zeke to be there. Like, and that's kind of how I approached it early on. Now that and I think you could, because I do think back, like, man, we're getting old, but like 10 years ago, 8 years ago in that area, like there wasn't a lot of stuff out there for these formats. So you could still find diamonds in the rough. You could still add people in your supplemental drafts. Like there's times for that. Now that people are getting more educated, there's more stuff out there for people. My approach has shifted to peer value drafting. So I just look for the positions that people are going to want, and I really try to win it on the NFL side. So I will take a Justice Haynes, who I know is going to probably accumulate value in that first round, like you mentioned him earlier, but I probably won't finish with Justin Haynes on my roster by the time he comes out. I will move and try to retool. So I essentially have gone from standard taxi gun, oh, this guy's filling this spot, so now I'm like, oh no, that dude's going to fill me a Nick Chubb on the NFL side, so I can go try to win it. And that's kind of how I've done that. And over time, my approach has changed too, with really smart Devy managers that I have in leagues. They're not even analysts, because some of the best Devy people are not analysts. They're just dudes that love it. And that's what they've done. For a long time, they just accumulate picks, and they just try to, trade assets, and they're very active. And I always watch them. I'm like, man, they're building juggernauts on that NFL side, because when you get in the Devy, everybody wants the young pieces, and they forget that the NFL side is the one that matters. And I will thank a lot of the people that play Camp as a Can and CFF, because people go into it with that kind of a mindset, and it helps you, because you're like, oh yeah, this guy's a stud in college. Go get Blake Corum. Give me that guy, that stud running back in the NFL. And they'll do it if they're young at the format, because they don't understand Blake Corum might not get that draft capital that you like. And so, and that's how you kind of manipulate the market. So essentially, that's how I do it. I manipulate the market, and I trade a lot of guys. And that's the part that you have to really love about. If you're not a good trader, or if you're not someone that wants to be active, Devy might not be for you, because you can't just sit and hold those assets. Because I think it's a 50% hit rate. We've done some of the numbers and looked at it, and that's even high end. I would say probably 25% hit rate on a lot of these guys. So if that's the case, then you got to move them off your roster.
Oh yeah, I love that take, because I think about guys who, let's just use this recent draft class with Tank Bigsby and Zach Evans, guys who coming in, we were super excited about, and Tank Bigsby put up that great freshman year, and we were really excited about. And then all of a sudden, people have been holding on to him for a long, long time, and he's who knows what he's going to be in Jacksonville. So when you're kind of evaluating, and this, if it's a player by player thing for you, you can tell me that. But is there kind of a time frame where you feel a player makes the biggest jump in value? Do you recommend doing it after that breakout freshman year? Do you like to wait until right before the NFL draft, right after the NFL draft? Is there a time where you kind of can maximize that value?
So there's two things I like to look at. So I would say freshman running backs usually hit their value in the second year. So that's sophomore year. So you see Travion Henderson was getting drafted ahead of Bijan sometimes in some Devy drafts last year. So I do think that freshman wide receivers and running backs, the value definitely kind of peaks their sophomore year. Now, there's always outliers. But think about it. Kayshon Boutte, who everybody was drafting as kind of that guy 2 years ago, you moved him then, you could have got a legitimate top 10 piece on the NFL side. Now he's barely making the roster on the Patriots. So, I think that sophomore year is really, really league dependent, but I think that's a good area to kind of move off of some guys. I will say, too, though, before the NFL draft, the Senior Bowl is my friend. I love the Senior Bowl, because these guys go to the Senior Bowl, and they get some love out there, and you're like, man, I've had him on my roster. He's not that good. I know that he's struggling, and then someone will believe in him. There's always those dudes that they go to the Senior Bowl, and then they kind of hit that draft stock, and then you can kind of move them. So I think there's two really big ones. And then how it is too. Those people that don't necessarily, they can play Devy, but they're not in college football. They watch it, but they're kind of casuals, which is totally fine. those big games matter too. So, the college football playoffs, the SEC title game, like there's little like ways that you can manipulate the market when these guys go off and they're actually on TV and people are watching them. They're not like us streaming from some illegal site watching like Hawaii at 10 o'clock at night.
Couldn't be
yeah,
me.
Like they're there and they're seeing them. So like I think there's like little manipulations in the market too within your leagues. But big overarching themes to me have always been that. Also, like I also tend not to, and we'll probably get into this, but the freshman quarterbacks get overvalued really heavy the first year, and then there's a buy market the second year. Like Arch Manning is going to be a fun buy next year when he doesn't play and people forget about him. And Dylan Raiola, who's going to Georgia, is now the hot new thing. You could get Arch probably like the 6th, 7th round next year. Like Malachi, if he doesn't play behind Caleb Williams this year, and then there's rumors that maybe Miller Moss will win the job or whatever. Like, so there's also buy opportunities where you can go get some of these guys. The running backs that Jam Miller from Alabama is a good example. He was really some people's like one running back 2 last year. Doesn't really play at Alabama because, you don't play at Alabama right away as a true freshman running back. Maybe Justice Haynes was trying to buck that trend with Tommy Reese being there. But Jam's a perfect buy right now because everybody's forgotten about him. So there's like little like areas of like, oh, I can go get these guys now because their value definitely dipped. And then, oh, okay, now's the time to kind of sell. So when you figure out what that market is in your league, that's important to note because it is also league dependent, how active your league is.
Yeah, I really like all of that. I think that's a very good approach. And I think it's different than what a lot of people are thinking. I think one area where I'm a little bit different is if it's a receiver that kind of has a breakout sophomore year, is entering his junior year and has somehow managed to escape being drafted already. I think about a guy maybe like a Rome Odunze this year who, not many people rostered him in Devy last year, but now all of a sudden, I could see him not just as being someone that I draft to trade, but man, he might be someone that's worth holding on to because he might get that early day 2 capital. I see people taking him or projecting him to go in the first round in the NFL draft. We're going to talk about Rome later, but that seems spicy to me. But it has put him on my radar a little bit more, and I find myself drafting him because if I'm seeing this news, other people will be seeing it sooner than later, and then I can use it to my advantage. How do you approach? We're going to be talking about wide receivers today, and before we jump into like player specifics, I'd love to just hear your approach to wide receiver in Dynasty in general, and then also in Devy, because I think most of us have kind of pivoted to this belief that the best way to build out a Dynasty roster is relying heavily on that wide receiver position because they can retain value for so much longer. So I'd love to hear your approach to wide receiver. Are you zigging while we zag? Are you still zigging? I don't know what zigging and zagging is in this, but go ahead and break it down for me.
I'm so mad because we used to be able to build through wide receivers without anybody noticing, man. Like we used to be able to get some of these good wide receivers while other people were drafting Chuba Hubbard at the 104. Or remember, Max Borghi at the 105. Like I remember.
My God.
These things happen.
It was never me. I don't know if you can see. I'm wearing my Oregon hat today, so Max Borghi never was on a roster.
but he was like I was in a big analyst league that I was in, but the heavy Devy guys, and I remember I got Jamar Chase at 106, and I'll never forget Max Borghi went at 105, and I was like,
that's amazing,
man. So we have seen a shift now. I will say this though, when I was going through, we had a recent draft that I did, a 10-round startup. When you're looking at the running backs, we only had 2 wide receivers taken or 3 wide receivers taken in the first round, and we did have 5 running backs go in the first round. So like I think that there's elite running backs going in that first round, but then there's so many good wide receivers after that. So I like to if I can grab a legit running back, Travion, Singleton, if Judkins is in there for you in the first, I don't mind waiting because of the talent level in that second round for some of these wide receivers. But yeah, I mean, I like to build through wide receivers. I like Marvin Harrison Jr. for me, obviously, is the gold standard right now. But after that, like there are some very good second round guys. Evan Stewart from Texas A&M, Zachariah Branch going to USC. So building through there because they hold their value much longer, and they actually perform. They perform their freshman year, which when guys in Devy see that, oh wait, they're performing, their value automatically goes up because they're on the field. So we see that pretty heavily too. And then because of the way that dynasty managers are building their rosters, they are more, what I have seen, I don't know if in your leagues like this, but they are more willing to trade for wide receivers in Devy than running backs. I think they're spooked on the running backs, so you don't get the value that you necessarily want to get. But wide receivers still hold it because that's the new trend, right? The dynasty area is in there. So you are seeing that. I will say the one trend that I'm starting to see, though, is because people are really going after running back or wide receivers, in that second and third round. Some of these good running backs are, falling down. So like Katron Allen from Penn State, he went at the 410. I got him at the 410 recently. That's a pretty good value for Katron Allen, who's a really good running back at Penn State. And so there is something that's going with the zagging part. I think the zagging part is that running back value has shifted down in the third and fourth round now you're starting to see some guys that maybe could they get that day two capital. Think of Kendre Miller, those guys that we've seen the last couple of years. You can really kind of get those guys if you know the profile that you're looking for.
Yeah. That, and I think that's a really good approach. And it's tough too, because so much of it is going to be dependent on where you're drafting and what it looks like. But do you find yourself, if you're walking away from a Devy draft, or if you're just looking at your team regardless, I'm guessing I know the answer to this, but when you're looking at your Devy assets, I feel really shitty saying Devy assets when I'm talking about college football human beings. But when you're looking at these names on the screen, do you care what position is listed there? Are you totally fine to have your entire Devy roster built out by all wide receivers if it so happens to be that position? Or do you like to have a little bit of everything?
For me, it really comes down to like trade for need, like they always talk about. So if I need a running back, I'm not going to reach on like Blake Corum, right? Like there's really areas there. I would say the only position that to me matters a little bit maybe is quarterbacks. If you're looking at your quarterbacks, and I always try to stay away from Devy quarterbacks, but if you got two guys on the NFL side that you're really concerned about, like let's say you're starting Baker this year and you're just looking at your roster and you're like, man, my super flex league, I don't mind maybe taking a shot at Arch or Nico or Jackson, one of those freshman guys in that fourth round. Or maybe if you have like a couple, other picks where you have Jordan Travis sitting there in like the fifth round and you think maybe at Florida State he can break out this year, I don't mind doing that. But from just a straight, hey, I don't care what my roster looks like, because really it doesn't necessarily matter, because I can just move them to other guys that need that position or want that position more. And then use your league mates. Like, you should know your league mates' tendencies, but I always use, how it is in Devy leagues. There's college fans in Devy leagues, and those are my favorite because they fall in love with their guy. So you can take like Kevin Coleman, who's going to Florida State. If you find a Florida State fan, those dudes are crazy. They will give you some pretty damn good value for Kevin Coleman right now. Like, so one other way to look at it too is like, I actually have a spreadsheet of like my Devy managers that I'm in, and I put what their favorite college football team is. So I know, like, okay, if I draft this guy, there's going to be a willingness for him that increases their value. So there's a little gamemanship in this too. Like, you got to know like what your league mates like and who they target and who their favorite team is. Like, I'm a Michigan fan, so I don't have to worry about wide receivers. No one can trade me a Michigan wide receiver. Get the hell out of me in life. There's no good ones. But like, you got to know, like, hey, you can use that to your advantage, because I know I'm in a lot of leagues with Michigan fans because I'm a Michigan fan myself. They love Blake Corum. I will greatly trade Blake Corum. So like, one guy in one of my leagues thinks Blake Corum is Nick Chubb. He's told me this multiple times, and I'm like, okay, buddy. Like, I wish I had Blake Corum, because I would ship him off to you in a heartbeat. So I think there is part of that too. Like, yeah, you just draft based on value, but also knowing like, who you can trade these people to is important, because that sets you apart on the trade market.
Yeah. I'm with you. I'm an Oregon fan. Don't try to trade me any Oregon players. I'm not
Troy
interested.
Franklin, baby. Here we go.
Yeah.
Troy
I mean,
Franklin.
I love Troy, but yeah, we'll get to him in a little bit here. You've mentioned Blake Corum a couple times now. Are you on the podcast? We kind of have this idea and understanding that Donovan Edwards is the more talented of the two backs. Do you agree or disagree with that take?
I think he's more talented in terms of like NFL draft capital. Like, if I had to pick which one is going to be better in Devy, it's Donovan Edwards, because his skill base I think is better than that. As far as like college football, I think Blake's amazing. I love Blake. Blake is one of the best college football players at Michigan, probably in the last 20 years from the running back position. But if I'm projecting NFL, yeah, Donovan to me is easily the better NFL project.
Yeah, that's kind of how we feel too. Well, we're going to take a real quick break, and then when we get back, we're going to jump into some wide receiver specifics. All right, we are back. We are going to get into our wide receiver discussion. Kevin, you had a video on your channel, time is a flat circle. I don't remember when it was, but you go through your tiers.
Yeah.
And let's just start up at the top. I don't think it's a surprise. You've mentioned him already. I had a recent article come out on RotoViz where I kind of broke down my top 20 wide receivers. So we can kind of compare and contrast and see where we're at. But our tier one, we have exactly the same. It's only one player. It's Marvin Harrison Jr. I will allow you to talk a little bit about Marvin Harrison Jr. and why he is all alone in tier one for you.
Yeah, I mean, Marvin's special, right? Like when you're looking at what Marvin's been able to do, I think for me, I think the big thing was this dude came in and put on like what 20, 25 pounds from his freshman year to sophomore year. That's what you saw last year, 6'4", 205. The big things I highlight: ball skills, size, footwork. I mean, he's got good footwork. His dad probably taught him. So like there is that going on. Like when you watch him off the line, there's really nothing he can't do. When you're looking at all the metrics, so like experience adjusted receiving yards per team pass attempt, he's right up there with Jamar Chase was as a sophomore. And if you think of Jamar Chase as a prospect, he is right there. And he's ahead of Justin Jefferson already as a prospect. Weighted dominator rating, again, he's ahead of both Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase. So when you're looking at the analytical profiles, and I'm not a big analytics guy, but I do kind of look at the big ones. He fits that measurables, and then from just a film, he's just a dog, man. Like he just goes up. He's gonna be a top 5. I would be shocked if he's not a top 5 NFL draft pick. So when you're looking at it's hard to say can't miss Devy prospect, but this dude is about as can't miss as you possibly can hit here with everything that he does. I think he has elite speed, enough speed. I don't think that I see some people kind of talk about that. I still think he can do it. The only thing they talk about is he needs to learn coverages a little bit better, how to kind of fit between zone and man, which that's just something that he'll learn. But no, he's pretty much a can't miss guy. He's a tier of himself for sure.
Right. And outside of injury, I think the only concern I have is just the change in quarterback at Ohio State. Kyle McCord coming in, maybe Devin Brown later, who knows. But again, I think even if the production dips a little bit, firstly, there's so many weapons on Ohio State that I don't think we're worried about dominator ratings there. It just means something a little bit different now.
Yeah.
But I can't imagine, even if JSN hardly played last year and he still got drafted high. I think Marvin Harrison Jr. Will be right there as well. So yeah, I'm with you. I think Marvin Harrison Jr. is a slam dunk tier one. How big of a drop is there for you between tier one and tier two?
This one's tough. I think there's a significant drop because I think there's a lot of question marks after him. Like, I think that there's some guys in this tier that we're going to talk about that could definitely step up and be first round picks. So I think that's there. But as far as like elite level dynasty value talent, I think after Marvin Harrison, I think you're looking in like the wide receiver 20, kind of where Addison and Quentin Johnson are right now in dynasty ranks. So from a value perspective, there's a big tier break because I don't necessarily think you're getting like these guys jumping into that top 10 area.
Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right. Each of these guys we have questions about. You're kind of from here on out, your tiers are players like grouped in fours, and I don't know if that was intentional or convenience. I have mine kind of broken out based on how I value them. And part of what comes into that is how many years they have left before they're draft eligible. So I kind of group the upperclassmen and underclassmen together and tier it that way. That's just how I approach a draft. Branch is going to have a lot less value to me because he's further out. But that's a discussion for another time. Let's jump into tier two. I only have two guys in this one. I have Emeka Egbuka and Xavier Worthy. You have both those guys, but you also include Evan Stewart and Luther Burden. Luther Burden's a guy I have ranked quite a bit lower. He's on the number 10 for me. I'd love to hear you sell Luther Burden to me. You can tell me some of the concerns you have, but I'd love to hear just a positive, glowing report on why this Missouri wide receiver is safer than maybe I think. Or maybe it's not about safety. Maybe it's about upside. I won't put words in your mouth.
He's the next Debo. Come on, we gotta get the. There's always the next Debo out there. No, I think with Luther, I think you're projecting a little bit here, right? Like I think it is a projection. I think he hits the size metrics and the yak metrics. Like when you're looking at his ability to kind of, they use him in different ways last year a little bit. Obviously, the production wasn't necessarily there. 45 catches, 300 yards, but he did have 6 touchdowns, so that's why his dominator rating definitely hit. He's that person that when you watch him play, like you can tell that is an NFL wide receiver, like size, usage. He's got good athleticism. I think that he can test a little bit better than he probably has. The problem is he plays in Missouri, and I really wanted him to transfer. Like I really like of anybody this offseason, I was like, Luther, just go to USC, buddy. Like just please, just go somewhere. And I know that I think his grandfather went to Mizzou, so I think he does have like ties there. But just from a metric standpoint, like he hit the target market share at 20%, touchdown market share was at 42%, dominator at 28%. So when you're looking at the advanced stats, he definitely hits all of those metrics. Luther's going to be an interesting one because I don't necessarily think he's going to be able to produce amazing numbers that we're used to seeing at Missouri. That quarterback room is a mess right now. Like they have like 4 okay
is
guys.
Jake Garcia going to be starting? I mean,
Jake probably. They talked about it as a battle right now. Cook, Jake, and those guys. I think Jake should start if you're thinking of like, and you better hope that he maybe starts with Luther being there. I think the biggest thing I think I was concerned about is Dominic Lovett outproduced him last year. And then he transferred. So it's like, okay, well, he's not there anymore. So now it's really Luther's status there. So I think if he hits there, I think the 25 wide receiver class too has some, I wouldn't say question marks, but no one's really established themselves as the dude. So if he can maybe go in there, has a good season for Mizzou, I think you could be talking about him being like a top 2 of his class.
Yeah. And the other guy kind of in this class that you have in this tier is Evan Stewart, Texas A&M. And a really difficult offense to watch at times last year, those Aggies. I mean, it was brutal.
Yes.
But they also have brought in a new play. Well, I don't know. We got a new play caller, but we've got a new offensive coordinator. We'll see. We'll see what happens there. Hopefully a new play caller. But Evan Stewart looks like he can be the man with Achane gone now to the NFL, different position, of course. But that kind of frees up the offense a little bit, in my opinion. Connor Wegman, I expect to take another step coming in as the starter after getting a little bit of work last year. I could see Evan Stewart kind of having a big year. There is still Muhammad there, who's a solid prospect. But what are your thoughts on Stewart? How can you kind of see a path for him to maybe get the wide receiver 1 in this class?
Dude, I love Evan Stewart. So I was an Evan Stewart wide receiver 1 guy last year going into it, and then there wasn't that many of us out there. We were barren out here in the Devy space. It was always Luther Burden, and to me as Evan, Evan reminds me of a smaller Jamar Chase, and I'll put that comp out there. Like I really like everything that he can do. He's got good speed, hands. Like when you're looking at his ability to have a good catch radius on the sideline, he made some catches last year against Alabama that were just stupid. Like his ability to kind of go up and get it, and even though he's 170, he doesn't play 170, and I think he can get up there in the weight a little bit. But also, to our point of what we've seen in the NFL, they are drafting these guys at 170 now because I think NFL offenses are shifting, and we've seen that. So like weight to me isn't that big of like a red flag anymore because we just saw Zay go in the first round, Addison go in the first round. Like we've seen that now. So I think he can get first round capital. The biggest thing I have circled for Evan Stewart is game changer. This guy he just changes the game. And when you watch college football, there's only a certain number of athletes that you're just like, oh, that dude, he can change this entire game by one play, one catch. Evan's that guy. I don't know if Luther's that guy. I think Luther can be a very good yak guy and kind of make things happen. But Evan, when he's on the field, defense has got to know where he is at. And he produced even last year with terrible quarterback play with Haynes King being out there and Johnson. And then when Connor did step in, you saw him really you saw him target Evan a lot more towards the end of the year. And I do think that's a good step. And I like Connor more than some. I think Connor has good accuracy and he can make every throw he needs to. If Petrino's calling the plays, I'm a little more happy. Like I'd be happy if he's going to call the plays. So like, that's something to know. Like if Bobby Petrino's out here, not on a motorcycle, he's out here calling the plays and doing well. I think Evan can really elevate himself there. Evan's one of those guys, though, that I don't think is going to be on Texas A&M after this year. I think he's going to transfer. I think if they really struggle this year in terms of that offense, or if when you're looking at the coaching staff, Jimbo gets fired down there, I think Evan could find himself on another roster somewhere, and then his value is going to shoot up even more. But the dude is just a game changer. Like, he's just some way you're watching the tape, you're like, this guy he has that it factor.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting too, bringing up transfer and NIL and all that kind of stuff that changes the landscape of college football so much, and it has to therefore impact how we view Devy players, because I remember being really kind of down on Jahmyr Gibbs because Georgia Tech was gross. Well, I'm an idiot. He didn't stay there. He moved and got really, really great draft capital, and I had 0 shares. So I do think that's also important to remember. The 2 guys that I have in tier 2 are Emeka Egbuka from Ohio State, who we mentioned his teammate earlier, and then Xavier Worthy, who's another 6 foot, 6'1", but really slight frame dude, like 165, 170, like tiny. These guys, I think, though, are set for day one capital when they declare. I hope next year as early declarees, as juniors. What do you think on these 2 guys? Do you have them kind of not 1A, but 2A and 2B, or do you think that the other 2 guys you just mentioned could be more valuable than them long term?
Yeah, Emeka's so tough for me. Emeka is the one that, like, I have him in that tier. I do have him as wide receiver 2 of that class. It's just I don't know how to explain it. Like, when I watch Emeka, he does everything well. Like, but he doesn't, like, when you're going to, you're like, man, where's that extra separation? Where's that, like, hey, can he go up and get in contested catches? Like, you don't see that. And then part of it's because that offense is just ridiculous. Like, that offense just sets these guys up for success. So then when I try to think about, like, all right, like, is he really that good? Then you think about what Chris Olave did in that offense. And now Chris Olave is a top 14 guy too. And you're like, oh, well, maybe that's just Emeka, right? Good hands, good balance, versatile. But yeah, I think there are some people out there that think Emeka is pushing Marvin Harrison in terms from an analytical profile. And I know he hits those metrics. So I do think that I'd be shocked if Emeka wasn't a first round pick. Like, he for sure is going to be in that category. Xavier's the tough one because, like you said, 163 listed. I hope he eats some burgers before he weighs in at the combine next year, because if you're listed at 163, like, you better get up there at least to 170. But with Xavier, I think the yak and the footwork and explosiveness stuff is really what sets it apart. And like I mentioned earlier, if Zay Flowers is getting first round draft capital, how is Xavier Worthy not going to get first round draft capital? Because Xavier is, I think, a better prospect overall. And people knock him for his drops. He had a broken hand last year that people didn't really know about until after the season. Like, yeah, he had that bad one in the bowl game that would have been a touchdown. But with a broken hand, come on, he's a wide receiver who's gotten it out there. So I think both those guys could find themselves in there. And I think this is that tier for me. Like, okay, I'm comfortable drafting these guys. There's not a ton of question marks with this tier because I do think the draft capital is coming.
Yeah, that's really good. I thought we had gotten to the point where we were like, drops aren't that predictive. That doesn't mean that much. I thought we had moved on, but I guess a lot of people haven't.
It depends. It depends who you like. That's the outlier. If it's someone you like, it's like, oh, that's not predictive. Like, don't worry about
it. That's right. Let's move on to tier 3 for you here. And we're going to start with a name that I have 0 shares of, and I'm hating it already because I think it's going to be exciting. And that's Zachariah Branch. And then you've got Golden, Neighbors, and Troy Franklin in this tier. My tier here is a little bit different. I've got Malik Neighbors, Troy Franklin, and then a guy you've got much, much lower in Ja'Cory Brooks. So a little bit of difference here, but I'd like to hear about Branch first and foremost. Travis, who is not on the show today, obviously, my co-host, he loves Branch. He says he could be the closest thing that we've seen to Tyreek Hill in a minute here. Tough comparison to live up to, but what are your thoughts on Branch? Do you think, you've got him number 6, you're high on him too. I'm guessing you're excited.
So yeah, I get worried about always calling small wide receivers Tyreek Hill,
I
but like
know.
we've been doing it for. I mean, I do it too. So it's not just Travis or anybody out there. I think Branch for me, like I think it was a combination of everything. And then again, when I do my rankings and my tiers, and I was doing for the video, I'm also looking at expected value. So for me, a lot of my tiers, this is why I always try to like really preface this. Maybe we should have talked about the strategy. When you get Devy rankings from different analysts, knowing what those rankings mean matter probably more than like, like you talked about how you care about when they're coming out. That's going to dictate rankings a little bit different for me
Absolutely.
because I look at it from a value perspective. So like when I talk to people all the time, I'm always like, hey, Devy rankings really don't matter unless you know what they are, what they actually are. It's not like Dynasty where it's like this guy's going to produce and he's hold his value for 3 years. Well, no, sometimes Devy's a little different. So knowing where that comes from. So Branch's value to me is, hey, he's in a USC system that's going to elevate his profile because he's just going to get targeted. And I think he can be out there and be impact day one. From the spring stuff that I've read and all the camp stuff, they love this kid already. He's going to return punts and kickoffs, I'm assuming, right away. And then you're going to get him into a system, and with either Caleb Williams, Malachi Nelson, whoever's going to be there, he's got the speed. I mean, speed is everything in college football. So his ability to kind of create separation in space is going to be probably, better than anybody in this class. Explosive, really good vertical threat in a vertical offense. So think of like, people were so excited about Mario Williams a couple years ago, and Mario hasn't panned out to what some have expected. I wasn't never a really big high on Mario, but Branch is like probably 10 times a better prospect than him in this offense, what he can do and accomplish. I think that's the exciting part. And the biggest weakness he has is probably just his size. But again, he's actually built, his frame's a lot different build than like Xavier. So at 5'10", 172, when you look at Zachariah, like he's a build. He's got muscle, he's got muscle on that build before he even got into college. So I do think he's going to get there. The one hesitation I would have with Branch, and we see this sometimes with high school kids, is like this is him. Like this is like his peak athletic ability was in high school because he was just dominating out there at Bishop Gorman. It was like you watch the tape, you're like, who is that dude? Like because you're watching the defense, just jump around him. So if he's capped, then okay, this is what he is. But if he's not capped, this dude's got a ceiling that we haven't seen in a long time.
Yeah, that's exciting. Another guy like that we talk about a lot on the show is Barian Brown, who we'll get to in a little bit. But another guy that just different out there when you're watching them against other high school players, which is really unfair. Let's talk about Malik Neighbors for a minute because he kind of surprised a lot of people out producing Kayshon Boutte last year at LSU, myself included. I was not high on Boutte, but I definitely didn't expect that to happen. So do you think Malik Neighbors can repeat that? Do you think, I mean, again, he was a pretty great prospect in and of himself, like as a recruit. So tell me a little bit about Neighbors and why you're excited about him.
Yeah, I know that I don't want to make Travis mad because I don't want to besmirch Jaden Daniels here on the show, but Jaden Daniels needs to stop overthrowing Malik Neighbors. Like that's first and foremost. Number one, like I think if Malik to me, like 3 touchdowns last year, could have been 7 or 8 in my opinion, based on just the tape watching him. Just he was flat out open all over the field. Malik's the perfect Devy riser. Athleticism, toughness, good against press coverage, got the size and the frame, everything that you like from just a receiver. And when you comped him, so I comped him to all LSU wide receivers in a video that I did when I was breaking down the class. And he's right up there, right under Justin Jefferson for receiving yards per team pass attempt. So at his sophomore year, and then weighted dominator rating, he fits right in between Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase. So I like to comp those guys, like the LSU guys, because and again, I think when you I don't helmet scout, but these dudes produce. I mean, in Terrace Marshall's season, I just saw it on Sleeper the other day. Like they posted it. He's back. So we don't have to worry about that one. But I think that Malik checks all the boxes from like an athletic profile. Like I think the only thing that I knocked in his profile for me, route running, gets pushed off routes a little bit. And I think that's more of like he's got to learn how to get off his routes and everything. But he's going to be that guy stepping in. He is the wide receiver one on this roster. And he could get first round capital. Like that's the type of guy that the NFL is going to really like. Just please, Malik, if you're listening to this pod, would you not be stupid off the field? you already got a little bit of trouble this offseason. We don't need Kayshon Boutte, like, the ghost of Boutte on us. Like, just be smart. I think that is also a concern a little bit, like him getting in a little bit of trouble. And you don't want to see that. But from like a on the field standpoint, this dude's got it. He's got it.
Yeah, it's interesting. We talk sometimes about how the off the field, whatever you want to call it, affects how we draft players, and it's unfortunate that it has to be part of it, but you really have to think about that, because it's definitely, if nothing more, it should be a tiebreaker for people. But yeah, Malik Neighbors coming off just an incredible year, 72 catches, 1,000 yards. This next guy, Troy Franklin, another fantastic prospect. I love Troy Franklin as an Oregon Ducks fan, but as an Oregon fan, I also know that it's been 50 years since we've had a wide receiver drafted in the first round. So I'm not holding my breath. But Bo Nix is coming back, and as much as people love to make fun of Bo Nix, his pass efficiency numbers were absolutely insane. And Troy Franklin looks to have another great year. Oregon did bring in some other players, but to me, that's not really going to be a problem. This is one of the first times we've seen in a long time, this last season, where Oregon actually kind of funneled targets to one player. Usually they spread the ball out a ton. I think it was Dylan, whatever, I forget his name, 4 years back, that he ended up with the Minnesota Vikings. Anyway, Troy Franklin, thoughts? Do you think he could creep in and break the curse of 50 years without a wide receiver in the first round?
I hope so, man. Troy's my guy. Like, he was out here in California, so like I've actually gotten to kind of know like a little bit about his, because I wouldn't have actually watched him in high school. I was so happy for him last year because he stepped up. Like, his first year, he wasn't at wide receiver 0. He had 209 yards, 2 touchdowns. So we're like, okay, he did something. And then for me, it was like, okay, is he going to be able to take that from Dante Thornton? Like, can he kind of take that? Is he going to be the dude? And he is, because Thornton transferred. Obviously, that didn't work out. I think the thing with Franklin that I like the most about him is like he's a true deep threat. Like, he's got that deep threat route running. He improved his route running last year. Like, you really saw like nuance in his game, ability to kind of create separation, keep guys on his hip, get in and out of breaks. He had a few great catches when they played. I think it probably was the Washington game. He had a few on the sideline catches that were just like, oh, okay, Franklin's here. He's here to stay, because he can kind of do that. I'm expecting big things from him. I think he can break out. I think that the size is less of a concern for me because of his athleticism. And I know he hit like 24 miles an hour on the speed metrics, something that they do out there. I don't know, some analytics thing. Travis can talk to you guys about it. But like, yeah, I know he hit the speed metrics there. I think he's got good hands too. Like, he definitely improved those. The question is like, can he do enough to be round 1? And I don't know if he's round 1 guy, but I think he can be a round 2 guy. And I think that's a good metric for him.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think maybe a guy we'll talk about, if an Oregon wide receiver is going to break it, it might be this incoming guy they've got, who we'll talk about a little bit later. But Troy Franklin, I would love to see it. Last guy in this tier, and then after this tier, we'll kind of hurry up a little bit. But Matthew Golden, maybe not a household name yet. Talk to us a little bit about him.
Yeah, we're gonna fight. You hate Matthew Golden. I looked at your rankings and I'm like, man, we are not on the same page here. No, that's the great thing about Devy. For me, Matthew is my consensus 3 in the class, so I'm a little high. I'm definitely a little higher than most. You know what? He plays at Houston last year, 584 yards, 7 touchdowns. He's going to play in a system now without Tank Dell, so he's going to be the guy going to the Big 12 now. So now we don't have to worry about that G5 Power 5 thing that everybody kind of. I don't know if the Big 12 can be considered Power 5, but we will. We're going to do that. In my argument, shots now fired. Well, once Oklahoma and Texas leaves for sure, but like we'll go into that. But I think Matthew,
I'm a Pac-12 guy, man. I'm not allowed to make fun of anyone.
yeah, I know. I'm more of a Pac-12 guy too because I live out here. But yeah. So when you're looking at Golden, 6 foot, 190, good frame, good size, got the yak and the speed. I thought that for me he was a higher prospect on my list, even coming out of high school. Like I thought he got kind of under recruited where he went, but I think he went to a spot where he can definitely perform and have production there. Vertical threat too. I think he hits those metrics for me. There's not a ton that I don't like about him. I think he hit the touchdown markers here. He almost hit the 20% dominator rating last year with 18%. Gonna step up. He actually produced more more than Luther Burden did. Like, if we're going to be honest, like with what their production style looked like. And to me, Golden can be like a Neighbors, like somebody that he's kind of got that same frame, that build, that, oh, wait, who's this kid? Oh, he's pretty good. Yeah, he can get round 2 capital. Like, so for me in that frame, that's where I have Golden, and that's just why I'm a little higher on him than most.
Yeah, that works for me. Again, we'll see. I'm probably going to be, one of us is definitely going to be wrong. It might be somewhere in the middle. But yeah, I love being wrong when I'm down on someone. I love people just proving me wrong is a beautiful thing. We'll move a little bit quicker through these last few tiers. Tier 4, we've got Barian first round Brown is what we call him on this show. Travis is banging the drum for that. And then we've got my boy Jurion Dickey, Mekhi Lemon, and Antonio Williams. I like Antonio Williams an awful lot. I'm excited to see what could possibly happen there if the offense can get going again. We talked a little bit about that earlier. Maybe just kind of quickly run through this, talk about your favorite player in this group and why it's Jurion Dickey.
Hey, I could say Dickey, to me, he reminds me of Dez Bryant. Like, that's my comp. Dez Bryant is my comp for him. Like, and as a Cowboy fan, like Dez to me with Dickey, over the middle, yak ability. He was a man amongst boys out there in high school. Played both ways. So you know what? For the old school guy like me, that gives me a check. If you play both ways, baby, I'm moving you up in my rankings, no matter what. And I think he does step in and can compete this year. I know he wasn't an early enrollee, so he's definitely got a little bit of, ground to make up there. I know they like Kyle Casper. I know they like some guys in that room, but Dickey could definitely be that guy that steps up in there. And I like him with Novosad as well. Like, if Novosad takes over after next year, if it's Ty or Novosad, whoever it is, I think they could have a good connection there. So I think Dickey, to me, definitely can be there. I think he's my number 3 guy in the class for the 26 class. So he's high up there. But yeah, Dez, if you like Dez, I think you'll like Dickey. I think they profile really well together.
Yeah, 6'3", 210. He had a 9.89 247 sports composite score. I think it was number 2 wide receiver in the class, like in his, like according to 247 sports, which, I mean, awesome. Yeah, after Bo Nix is gone, I don't know who's going to be. I'm a huge Ty Thompson fan. I've been disappointed that he didn't transfer, actually, and it's just kind of stuck there. I was actually super pissed when Bo Nix transferred over because I wanted Ty to take the reins, and he might never get his chance. But Jurion Dickey, man, he could be really, really special. And again, like you mentioned, Oregon has seen quite a few players transfer out. There's opportunity for him this year with our new offensive coordinator. I say with Oregon's new offensive coordinator, they look to play a lot fewer like 2 tight end sets. So I think we'll see more spreading the field out a little bit more with the wide receivers. And I think that could be just fantastic for both Troy and Dickey. Let's go to your next tier here and talk about we've got Jonte Cook, we've got Ted McMillan, Adam Randall, and Mario Williams, who you mentioned earlier. Jonte Cook, of course, being the youngster in this group. Kind of a fun place to put him here because the sky really is the limit for him, but there's a lot of competition for targets on that Longhorns team.
Yeah, I did a reading the room for our YouTube series on the Texas wide receiver room, and I kind of broke it down like based on who's in there. Yeah, it's stacked. Like that's the talent there. They've talked about Cook in the spring though, and Sarkisian loves this kid. So like there's a chance that he gets out there. I think that if anybody goes down, like if there's an injury or something like that, Cook's going to be the guy. Like I think they've already kind of made that very clear. But they've made it clear that they want to get him involved as much as they possibly can. This kid, over time, he's really grown on me. He probably should be a little higher. He probably is a little higher now that I've redone my rankings a little bit. But yak ability, dude, this guy, he's got it. Like in playmaking, speed, like he marks all of those, like those categories. As a senior in high school, in 6A ball, so we're talking about really, competition level matters. 86 catches, 1,500 yards, 22 touchdowns. That's what he did as a senior. That's legit. And so if he goes to Texas and whether it's Murphy next year or Manning, or if it's this year with Ewers, I think he can really transcend this offense. And this is the type of kid you need to go play in the SEC with moving forward with Texas. Cook can do that. Now you're talking about playing against SEC talent as well. If he performs there, he's going to be a top 5 guy in overall by next year or maybe the year after.
Oh, that's exciting to hear because I've been a little lower on him just because I feel like a lot would need to break his way for him to see the field, just because there's so much depth, and they've got players returning from injury that we were excited about last year, and not many receivers left their room and they added. So I like your confidence on him. It definitely gives me a little bit more excitement moving forward, which I always like. Let's move to tier 6 here. We've got Bo Collins, Hakeem Williams, Jordan Hudson, and DJ Allen. Talk me through these guys. Maybe just a couple sentences on each one.
Yeah, this is my I don't know what to do with them tier because I like them, but like this is like they're good, they're talented, but I need them to do something. So for me, Bo, he's a 4-star kid out of California. He went to Clemson, has been in a bad offense for 2 years. And I think that when they've talked about Bo, they've talked about him being that field stretcher 50-50 guy, but they didn't really give him opportunities. Like it was DJU throwing it up in double coverage and he dropped another one. It's like, that's not really Bo's fault. Like, so in Riley's offense, can he really step up? So Bo's one of those guys to watch because one of those dudes in that Clemson room is going to step up, either Randall, Antonio, or Bo. And who's it going to be? I think that's the question. Hakeem is going to need some time at Florida State with all the transfers there. I think that Hakeem's going to have to like develop a little bit. In high school, he actually played quarterback and wide receiver because his team was so bad that they needed him. So he's going to have some developing, but I do think next year could be the time for Williams. Hudson is a guy, Jordan Hudson, he's going from TCU to SMU. So you don't like necessarily love that, but he does have talent. So when you're talking about Jordan Hudson, I think that he could step up in that SMU room, be the wide receiver one, but then you're betting on that G5 stuff. And I think that's where the questionable goes in there. But the athleticism metrics definitely hit for Jordan Hudson. And then DJ Allen was a highly touted recruit going into last year. He's at TCU. And while they did add JoJo Earl, I think losing Hudson and then obviously Quentin Johnson and some of those others, the senior receivers they had, Darius Davis, DJ Allen's a setup for prime TCU, like, hey, gonna get targets and production. So like those are the four guys, like with Allen being there, production really matters. So can these guys hit that production metric? I think that's what you're looking for with this tier.
Yeah, and that's a big one, and I think it's important to bring that up when you, especially like you talk about some of these G5 players, because it's a lot harder for them to get that draft capital, historically speaking. And there's of course always outliers, and so it's important to keep your eye on that. There's a couple names in here that in this next tier, in tier 7, that I really like. We've got Ja'Cory Brooks, who I had all the way in my top 10, and then we've got Jalen McMillan, J. Michael Sturdivant, who I don't think anyone outside of Pac-12 lovers appreciate who he is and what he can do. But he was the offense at Cal last year, and now going over to UCLA, where he should have a lot of opportunity with the trader Dante Moore at quarterback. And then Dante Thornton, speaking of traders, also leaving Oregon. So there's a bit of a theme here. But let's talk through some of these guys. Who do you like here?
Yeah, I think Ja'Cory just burned me too bad last year. Ja'Cory let me down last year. This is probably a little lower for him. He has an opportunity. Brooks has an opportunity to still be Alabama's wide receiver one this year. So like if he does step up and he does that, then yeah, he'll definitely improve the value. I will still stand on that Jalen McMillan is the best Washington wide receiver on the roster. So I'm going to stand behind my take there. Please don't send that to Roman Dunze's dad. He's on Twitter everywhere and he yells at people. But like I really like Jalen. I think he's versatile. I think he can play inside out. I do think that he can be that slot guy. He gets targets. He has speed. And then, of course, I got to throw my guy, J. Michael Sturdivant, in there. If you guys don't know who this kid is, highly, highly athletic kid from Texas 6A ball. He came to Cal. He went to Cal for some reason. He had a weird freshman year. He wasn't like, he didn't necessarily redshirt. He did. They got him on the field a couple times, but like, I don't know what was going on. That probably was maybe some stuff in the program. Then last year he stepped up. He looked really good. And I think the situation for him going to UCLA is really good because they need a wide receiver one. UCLA has not had a wide receiver like this either. And if Dante Moore does start, which he should start. If Garbers is out there starting, then Kelly, you need to fire yourself because like Dante Moore is ready to go. J. Michael could really be that guy that we talk about in this class having that big rise. And then I'm on the Dante Thornton train. I don't know what happened at Oregon. Not sure, But you just saw 2 Tennessee wide receivers get drafted in day 2. And if Dante Thornton can come up and step up, they've talked about him in the spring being versatile. They like his ability to go inside and out, even at that big frame that he's at. I think he's around 6'3", 6'4" in that area. I like Dante. I think that he's a sleeper. Like, I know, like a lot of people in Tennessee, they like Squirrel Williams. They like, why am I forgetting the other dude? Brew McCoy. He's been in college for 7 years. So Dante Thornton, I think, could be that guy in that room that steps up and gets that production.
Yeah, I like that. And I like that we got to talk about Brew McCoy because I love Brew. I've had him on rosters 4 years, 7 years.
For a long time. Yeah, for a long time. Yeah. Brew, you guys have like basically married. Like, you guys are married now together.
I'm a Brew truther. It's gonna happen. Just you wait. I was wondering if you were a little bit lower on Brooks because of the Alabama quarterback situation. Does that play into it as well, or is it more just you haven't seen it yet, and there's a lot of competition in that room?
I think a little bit. I think the thing I just keep going back with Jacory, they needed a wide receiver 1 to step up last year with Bryce Young, and he didn't do it. And they had to use Gibbs. They had to use Gibbs as almost their primary wide receiver last year at times. And Jacory was healthy. Like, there was nothing like necessarily wrong with him. So every time I think about Jacory, I'm like, yeah, he has talent, but why didn't he step up last year in an offense that could have? Now, and I like Bill O'Brien. I think Tommy Rees will be interesting because I think Tommy Rees is going to come in, and I think it's going to be a very heavy run scheme, 2-back scheme. That's why I think Haynes can get on the field a little bit more. But when you're looking at like the wide receivers in his offense, you haven't really seen that huge production. That could be talent-wise, obviously. But now he's got some competition coming in there. Hale's good. Malik Benson. Like, you guys got guys now. Kobe Prentice is another one I like. I really like Kobe Prentice out there. So, like, I think for me, it's like, hey, didn't step up last year. Increased competition. Who the heck's throwing in the ball? If it's Milroe, I'm even more concerned. New offensive coordinator that has a run-heavy system. So all those things kind of come into play for me with Jacory.
Yeah, no, that's very fair. Prentice makes he's my number 20. Another guy that I have on here is Walker, just transferred over to the Tar Heels. Mm-hmm. I'm a big Drake May fan, so that's not going to surprise people. But where does Walker, is he like an honorable mention for you, or are you just kind of down on him because of maybe draft capital concerns? Because I imagine you would project him to have decent capital. I mean, not decent capital, decent numbers this year from statistics.
I have kind of a rule as I don't like G5 to Power 5 guys. So that's essentially where I'm at with those guys, because I just don't feel like they pan out. The G5 to Power 5 guys in Devy. Now, for a CFF play, yeah, I think he's going to have some production there. But to me, like, I have to wait and see it. And that's the type of kid, like, if I miss, I'm okay. Like, because I do think the hit rates are so low on that. Like, if I miss on that, I'd rather take maybe a guy with a better shot in terms of like draft capital, what I think. So for me, it's just you know how we all have those little weird, like, tendencies in Devy. For me, it's the G5 to Power 5 transfer and wide receiver I try to stay away from.
Yeah, mine is often related to someone's last name. If they have a brother or a dad in the NFL, I give them a boost because I think that's just how the NFL works. They're like, oh, his brother's here. Yeah, let's bring him too. So one name that we have on that's on my list, we kind of discussed him a little bit, and his father, Rome Odunze. I don't know how to say his last name. What are your thoughts on him? Is you said he's not your favorite in the room there, but he's not in your top 25. So kind of where do you have him, and why are you a little bit lower on him than some?
I was just looking at it because I knew you were probably going to ask me this. He's at 26 for me, so he's right there.
Okay.
Like,
he's right there.
He's there. I like him. I think that he played really well last year in that offense and that system. I think a couple things broke right for Washington last year. Their offensive line was really good. They only gave up 4 sacks, so Michael Penix Jr. was able to kind of just sling it back there. Like, he didn't have that area. I think that he's really fluid as a pass catcher. I don't necessarily know what his athleticism metric is going to look like. What's his speed at? When you're looking at that, like, to me, he's a day 2 guy. I don't see the round 1. I could be wrong though. Like, Rome might prove me wrong there. I don't think he's as versatile as Jalen is, like, in that system and in that offense where he can kind of play both there. I think Rome is a good X, and he's going to kind of line up there. Yeah. I know he played in the slot in high school, but I think he's an X. He could be a starter though. Like, I think that he has some upside there. I would lean more day 2, day 3 though for him, and that's why, being an older prospect, if he would have came out out this year, I'd probably be a little higher on him. But being that older prospect where he's at, he's really got to hit some of those barriers now because he came back to school. And that's why I have him a little lower.
Yeah, I like Rome. If you are hoping to have some wide receiver production next year, like in the NFL, he's someone that I like to kind of go after because you can still kind of trade for him fairly cheap. I've been kind of maybe getting one of the receivers that I like a little bit more, and trading them for Rome and like a pick or for another Devy player as well. So kind of like trying to get him, acquire him for because he will be in the NFL next year. I'm certain of that. And I see these NFL draft guys putting him in the first round, and that just made me re-examine him. Any other players, any other wide receivers that you want to talk about that aren't on your list, but you just absolutely love, and you could see them climbing up and maybe getting there soon?
Yeah, not on my list. Let me think off the top of my head. I do like the one guy that's on my list that we didn't necessarily talk about. Mekhi Lemon is a guy that I like. He's going to USC. He kind of did the dual thing where he played little defensive back as well. He's been injured in the spring, so he didn't get very much love out there. So that's a guy there. Some other some deeper cut guys like Eugene Wilson at Florida could be a guy. He's a slot guy, true freshman. He could definitely. Florida needs talent. They definitely need talent out there. So that's the guy to look at. And then for me, the last guy too, because I cannot quit him. It's like that one meme. I can't quit you, man. It's Caden Prather, West Virginia wide receiver, went to Maryland. So I like Caden Prather. He's one of those guys. It's like he's just that guy to me that really steps up, and he could be that wide receiver 1 or 2 in that Maryland room with Talia Tagovailoa, basically a fifth-year kid there. So Caden Prather, I feel like, is a name that people should just know about. I don't know. No, he's got to produce, but he's definitely in a better offense this year for him. West Virginia had a terrible offense the last couple of years. So Caden Prather is just a name to watch.
I like that too. And we've seen, I mean, they had two, I don't know if they both got drafted, but Demas
Raheem Jarrett did not get drafted. I only know that. I only know that because I had a bet with Raheem Jarrett getting drafted and I lost it. So thank you, Raheem. I still believed in you and you let me down, damn it.
But he is in the NFL. I think he is on a roster right now.
Yes.
But yeah, so there are a lot of vacated targets, and really no one stepped up at Maryland last year and kind of demanded to be an alpha. So maybe he can get in there and get those targets that we need to see. Kevin, thank you so much for your time today. It was really good just sitting here and talking through some wide receivers and just getting your take on Devy in general. Again, you can find Kevin on Twitter at DuBois_22. Is that like a Emmitt Smith reference right there?
It is. It's my grandpa was a huge Emmitt Smith fan, a Cowboy fan, and he passed away. So when I first started my Twitter, it was like an homage to him. I never had any inspiring, I'm going to find followers or whatever, and it turned into something, but now I'm never changing it because it's my grandpa and I got to stick with him here.
Yeah, that is awesome. I love that. You can find some of his stuff over at the Devy Royale. Go and subscribe to that. Join their Patreon. As Kevin mentioned, there is just so much there for you. If you're listening to this podcast, you will love the content that they have. So Kevin, thank you so much. It's good chatting with you. We'll have to do this again sometime in the future. This has been a lot of fun, and I just can't wait for college football to be here. We're so close, and then the NFL shortly thereafter.
Yep. Appreciate you guys for having me.
All right, guys. Remember, hit that subscribe button, and we will talk to you all next week.